And we're live and back for our third live stream of the day. This time we also have someone who does not speak English, who is a global filmmaker. And we have another filmmaker here who does. And we've invited Siavash, who is going to tell us a little bit about himself as well, translating the English into Persian for our director of Forbidden Strings, Hassan Nouri. He will also be translating what the other director is saying, Monajati of Uproar, so that the filmmakers can connect. So this is going to be one of those interesting, like if we were on stage, it wouldn't be this kind of weird, squared awkwardness, but we can go with it because we've gotten trained over the last year and a half how to make things work. So my name is Pearl Gluck. I am the artistic director of the Center Film Festival. If you're joining us for the first time, if this is your third live stream, you already know that. And this time we're talking about a block of films that we called Step Up to the Mic. And it's about musicians that want to own their own spaces, despite what is happening either politically, culturally, gender biasedly. And we're basically on a journey with two films taking us into three countries. So Cuba in Uproar with Monajati's film, and Afghanistan and Iran in Hassan Nouri's film. And again, that too is about crossing borders, but literally between countries. And also in one's life. Can I pull it off as a musician? Can I handle that lifestyle, etc.? Before I ask my first question, we're going to give Siavash a moment to say hello and then to translate to Hassan what I just said in some kind of summaried. I wish him luck with this way.
Salam. Hi, I'm Siavash. I graduated from Penn State Architecture program, and I'm here to help translate English to Farsi and vice versa. And حسن میخوام بهت خوش آمد بگم از الان دیگه قسمت سوال و جواب برنامه شروع میشه.
خیلی ممنون در خدمت.
Thank you.
خیلی ممنون, right? Thank you. Yeah. All right. Well, my first question to both of you is talk to us a little about what made you pick up the camera and tell this story. What is your connection to these characters? Are you musicians? Was it the first time you heard someone? And in your case, Mo, and if you can start, you know, these are women in a men's world, or at least the men like to think it's a men's world. What drew you in? Are you Cuban? Tell us a little about that.
No, I'm not Cuban. Funny enough, when I was in Cuba, everyone asked me the same question. And Cubans always told me, you look Cuban. You might as well be Cuban, you know, but I'm not Cuban, actually. So basically what happened is, obviously, I do a lot of films, a lot of projects, and sometimes ideas come along the way. I'm a big fan of the Buena Vista Social Club, the music, and obviously the film, the documentary that was done. And I was looking into Cuba because it started opening up back in the day, like I think 2015, 14, it started opening up, and I started to see some photography coming out from there. A couple of my friends visited, and I really started there. I thought I want to do something about Cuban music. I didn't know where I was going, to be honest. I just thought I'll start with my favorite, Buena Vista Social Club. I started reading a couple of books, and then I stumbled upon rumba music. And it was really challenging to find any information about this music genre, to be honest, like on books or articles, because it's either all in Spanish, which I don't speak, or you'll find it in Cuba. It's not published online. You know, back in 2015, they didn't even have internet. So anything that was local, you cannot access. So I kind of researched. I reached out to a producer here, and I said, I want you to send me to Cuba to research a film about rumba music. And that was really it. Obviously I had a pitch. I knew why I was interested in rumba music, because it had a lot of history that reminded me of blues music and jazz music. So that for me was very interesting. It's related to the old slave trade that was happening. So this was my main kind of into rumba music. My other interest was also, why didn't this kind of music pick on internationally, like son, like salsa? you know, everyone in the world knows what son is and salsa is, but nobody knows what real rumba is, because there's the ballroom rumba, which is more like commercialized rumba. It's not really the real, like the authentic rumba. So that was my other thing. I wanted to find out, why didn't this pick up? Was it allowed to go outside of Cuba, or was it not? Or is it simply just because, you know, is it just, you know, appeal to international audiences? So I went there, you know, we had a friend there who knows a lot of musicians, a lot of, you know, rumba musicians, mainly male, to be honest. And I wasn't even thinking about Rumba Morena. I didn't know they existed. There was nothing about them online. There was some things about the old rumba musicians, male musicians. And I was talking to them most of the time, doing my research. So my plan was, first trip, go and do research, because online research was impossible. And come back, work on my research, prepare a pitch, and then go and do a full film. On my last day, after speaking to all the male artists and noticing there were no female artists, literally by chance and by accident, I was walking around, we were done shooting, I was filming my research as well. So I filmed, there's a lot of the footage in the film that actually it's my research footage. So I was filming that last day, taking a break, not filming anything, heard this music in some alleyway, random alleyway, walked in and I saw these 9 women playing music. And I was like, oh my God, this is better than anything I've heard. It was just so way more energetic. The thing is with rumba music, it could be sometimes a bit repetitive. And I kind of started to understand why it didn't pick up maybe internationally or commercially, because it's ethnic and it's repetitive and it has a specific way, but they were just putting their own spin on it. And I loved it. And I had a Cuban friend who I had to ask, because I'm like, look, I understand that I'm sort of from outside, I'm a tourist. I noticed that they're better than all the people I talk to. Is it just because it's me, or is it true? Like, is it, you know, I had to know. And she told me, actually, no, they are really, really good. So I waited for them to finish the show. You know, I took their number and I had to fly, I had to leave. So I couldn't actually do anything. I kind of quickly talked to them, took their number, my, you know, bad Spanish, so sign language, figured out to communicate, took their card, flew back to the UK. And that was it for me. The film, after that meeting with them, the film was about them. I liked whatever I did research wise, but I was just fascinated by that. This is how it started. And then obviously we planned on another trip where I went and I properly filmed with them, and that's what happened.
Great, thank you. Siavash, if you want to
sorry,
just a piece that maybe with the answer, the question and the answer. Poor Hassan. I'm sure, by the way, you can listen back to this afterwards, Hassan, and catch all of the intricacies of the conversation later, you know. But Siavash is going to give you a summary and ask you the same question.
حسن، سال اولی که اول از ما پرسیدن و الان من از تو میپرسم اینه که اصلا چی شد که تصمیم به ساختن همچین فیلمی گرفتی؟ چه ارتباط معنوی داری با بازیگرا، با کاراکتر فیلمت؟ و اینکه آیا خودت اهل موسیقی، آیا خودت سازی میزنی؟ جواب مو رو هم حالا پیل گفتش که بعداً سر فرصت میشه نشست و راجبش صحبت کرد، ولی حالا الان
آره، راستش من در دانشگاه، یعنی قبل اینکه سینما بخونم جامعه شناسی میخوندم و به هر حال میدونم که توی مهاجرت و از اون طبقه اجتماعی که ما میایم، یعنی به لحاظ اقتصادی جز طبقات فرودست هستیم، هنر اساسا مسئله نیست. توی مهاجرت محدودیت های زیادی داریم که این شکل از موزیک که بچه ها کار میکنن خیلی آوانگارد هست. خانواده‌های سنتی هستن که اصلا موزیک رو خیلی بد میدونن، یعنی موسیقی رو حرام میدونن و مجموعه این چیزها از دل بچه‌های هم نسل من و هم طبقه من قاعدتاً موزیسین بیرون نمیاره. و وقتی که اینا رو من دیدم احساس کردم که مثل پیامبرای دوران جدید یا پیام‌آوران دوران جدیدی هستن که علیه همه این چیزا دارن میجنگن و تا یه حد زیادی هم موفق بودن. یعنی مجبورن ساعت‌های طولانی کار کنن، با خانواده‌شون باید مبارزه کنن، با جامعه‌ای که اونا رو نمیپذیرن باید مبارزه کنن و هنوز سر پان. جدای همه اینها اونا رویا و آرزو داشتن، چیزی که باز هم برای مهاجرین افغانستانی توی ایران تقریبا ناممکنه و اونا میخواستن یه کنسرت برگزار بکنن، برگردن، یعنی برن افغانستان کشورشون رو ببینن، اونجا برای مردمشون کنسرت برگزار بکنن. و یه جورایی من احساس کردم که مثل یه گم شده که به ناگهان ظاهر میشه برات، با اینا ارتباط برقرار کردم. چون خود من هم یه آدم ما یعنی تو ایران بهش میگم بد مشهدی، بچه پررو بدین سرتق که کوتاه نمیاد، اون چیزی رو که میخواد براش میجنگه و میفته دنبالش. بنابراین من احساس کردم یه جورای خود من هستن اینا. یعنی منم ساعتهای طولانی کار میکردم برای اینکه بتونم درس بخونم. حالا مشکلات اینا رو نداشتم توی خانواده، ولی به عنوان یه مهاجر سختی خودم داشتم و من هم یه رویایی داشتم و اونم این بود که اولین فیلم بلندم بسازم. بنابراین ما همدیگر رو پیدا کردیم، به هم کمک کردیم که تارهای ممنوعه ساخته بشه که شاید این فیلم یه پیام آوری باشه برای بقیه، الهام بخش بشه براشون که ببین هر چقدر بهتون گفتن که شما ربطی ندارین به هنر، به موزیک، اینا برای شما ممنوع هستن، گوش نکنید، بریم دنبال رویات.
Okay. I studied sociology before I entered cinema in college, so I had a general idea. And as you can see in the movie, the socioeconomic class that I showed in the movie, music in that class, music is not a priority. Music doesn't belong there. And these guys were doing an avant-garde thing, going into music, and they were the trailblazers. They had to fight their families, very traditional, very religious families. They had to fight that. They had to fight the society who did not accept that, and also notice that these are migrants from Afghanistan living in Iran, and the society also doesn't accept that. And this seemed like an impossible thing to do for them in Iran. And they were eventually able to do it. And I had a similar story, maybe minus the family resistance. I also had a lot of those struggles, and in a sense, this is also my story. And I was lucky to found these guys, and we helped each other, and we hope to be able to inspire others to do the same.
Yeah, I mean, literally, Hassan, and you can tell him this, it leads right to my next question. So
دقیقاً کمک کردی به سوال بعدی که می‌خوام بپرسم ازت.
Right, because using art as resistance, we do relatively silently behind a camera, because we're telling these stories and we're just kind of the artist behind the scenes, and we let our characters tell that story. You can go ahead and translate that part.
استفاده از هنر به عنوان یه عنصر مقاومت، چیزی که تو هنر تو دیدیم، این که تو در واقع پشت دوربین هستی و از هنر استفاده میکنی برای اینکه نشون بدی این مقاومت رو.
And what's so incredible about both of these films is that you're having this relationship from behind the camera with another artist also resisting through their art. In this case, music.
و چیزی که جالبه در مورد این دوتا فیلم اینه که اون فیلم دیگه هم همینجور از پشت دوربین داره اون مقاومت و تلاش رو نشون میدی.
So maybe you can each talk about that, the actual art of the resistance in the art itself. Tell us a little about, playing rock and roll in Afghanistan. Why is that such an issue? Also, were you yourself on the verge of getting into trouble making this film? And the same with you, Mo, in Cuba, and with women playing this music.
و سوالی که ازت دارم اینه که برام بگید از استفاده از هنر به عنوان عنصر مقاومت و اینکه آیا نواختن موسیقی راک توی افغانستان چه مشکلی ایجاد میکنه و اینکه آیا خودت در حین ساختن این فیلم به مشکلی برخوردی؟
خب من توی خاورمیانه فیلم میسازم و این یعنی که همواره مشکل وجود داره قطعا. ولی آره برای من خیلی خودم هنرمند نمیگیرم. برای من سینما و هنر مثل یه ابزاری هستش، یه امکانی هستش برای اینکه بتونم اتفاقا جامعه شناسانه صحبت کنم. و در جهانی که زندگی میکنیم جامعه شناسی به یه معنا میدان نبرد هست بین مردم و نیروهایی که در فضای اجتماعی مدام سعی در سرکوب اونها داره. به این معنا آره ایده هایی که دارم و از سینما کمک میگیرم که به عنوان یه ابزار بتونم عنوانشون کنم، بتونم امکان مقاومت رو ولو در حد محدود فراهم بکنم. و زندگی ما سراسر جنگه و احتمالاً الان دوربین اسلحه منه. اما در مورد افغانستان ببینید موزیک راک مشکل نداره توی افغانستان، یا حداقل نداشت تا قبل اینکه طالبان اونجا رو تصرف بکنه، ولی تازگی داشت. و اون منطقه‌ای که ما رفتیم یکی از دورافتاده ترین و شاید بدوی ترین جاهای افغانستان، در میان کوهستان ها و مردم به شدت کماکان روستایی هستن و حتی شهر بامیان هم خیلی شهر نیست. براشون تازگی داشت، خیلی هیجان داشت، اما به طرز عجیبی استقبال کردن از ما. ولی مشکلی که ما داشتیم مسئله امنیت بود. اینکه ما به یه گروهی از مردم افغانستان تعلق داریم که تفاوت قومی و مذهبی داره اونجا و در طول تاریخ افغانستان مدام نسل کشی شده بود و صرف تعلق داشتن به اون مردم کافی بود که طالبان مجاز باشه برای اینکه ما رو بکشه. و وقتی که ما از اون جاده از بین طالبان رد شدیم، نه موزیسین بودن ما، نه فیلمساز بودن ما، هیچ کدوم اینها خطر تلقی نمیشد، ولی هزاره بودن ما بزرگترین خطری بود که اگر متوجه میشدن میتونستن حتی ما رو بکشن. و این مسئله بود که از لحظه که تصمیم گرفتیم بریم افغانستان همراه ما بود تا روزی که برگشتیم دوباره ایران.
He's saying yes, making movies in the Middle East is always a struggle, and he doesn't necessarily see himself as an artist, but he uses his art to as a medium to speak to speak about the society and sociology, and he wanted to show with his movie he wanted to show the people's fight against the power and the powerful, and living life in that region is always kind of like a war. He said rock music in Afghanistan was not an issue, at least before this recent Taliban's takeover. And when they traveled to Bamiyan region, it's a very rural area. Even the Bamiyan city is a very small city, and people are not necessarily exposed to rock music. So when they heard it, they were very welcoming and they accepted this. And they were saying the music wasn't an issue. Having a camera with them wasn't an issue. The biggest issue was the ethnic group that they belonged to, and that was the Hazara group, and that was the most difficult thing to deal with.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Amo, I want to hear your answer to that. I just want to follow up really quickly on this particular film. How you define yourself is obviously completely up to you, but to have had the vision to be with them throughout, and especially in that back room, I keep coming back to this back room where they're practicing, where they're connecting, and the contrast between that and, let's say, the workshop where he should be with his father, or a community center where they have to teach, which is a beautiful thing. But if you don't want to say that's an art, that's up to you. But to me, that was a very creative choice.
اینی که حالا خودت هنرمند بدونی یا ندونی، این به هر حال چیزی که خودت میدونی، ولی به نظر من اینی که هی میرفتی اون اتاق پشتی و میرفتی درون گروه و اون صحبت‌های بینشون رو نشون میدادی و اینی که هی میرفتی توی کارگاه نجاری و جایی که به نظر میرسید بازیگر اونجا به اونجا تعلق داره و با اینتراکشنش با پدرش، به نظر من خیلی انتخاب خلاقانه‌ای بود.
خیلی ممنون. البته من سینما رو به رسمیت میشناسم، دارم یاد میگیرم که بتونم ازش درست استفاده کنم، ولی میخوام بگم که منبع الهام من نه از هنر که جامعه شناسی میاد، ولی خیلی خوشحالم که این حرف رو میشنوم و انقدر تونستم حداقل از عهده کار بر بیام.
I'm very glad to hear that. I just wanted to say that I acknowledge cinema, and I just wanted to say that my source of inspiration is usually the society, not the art.
Understood. Yeah, I understand, and especially in Iran, where there's such a stellar history and presence of filmmaking and cinema. In fact, we have a couple of Iranian films in the student category that are astoundingly beautiful. So I understand that.
متوجهم، مخصوصا با توجه به اینکه ایران یه قطب فیلمسازی هستش و ما یک دو فیلم خوب ایرانی تو قسمت دانشجویی هم داریم.
So Mo, back to that question about 3 days ago that I asked about resistance from behind the camera, resistance from the front of the camera, and both in the form of art expression. What is your take on that? What was that like?
I have to agree with Hassan, like making films in the Middle East. I found it, especially as a documentarian, is always a challenge just because the topics that you can and you can't talk about, there are some limitations. There are some great stories and there is support, but also you always have to be aware of your limitations. And it was, I guess, the main reason for me to sort of move to the UK, because I wanted more freedom. I wanted to talk about more, topics that I can talk freely about.
Where are you from in the Middle East?
I'm Syrian.
Oh, okay.
I'm from Syria, but I didn't grow up in Syria. I would go as a kid, and I grew up somewhere else. But I always identified as Syrian, culturally, Going back to Uproar, basically what happened is, obviously, like I said, after the long story of how I met them, it wasn't just because of like their energy was great, but I had to connect with them, because making a documentary with someone, it's not just shooting a scene and moving away. You have to build a relationship with them. And although, they didn't speak in English, I didn't speak Spanish, we sort of figured there is something about them that I connected with. And I didn't realize what that was. And to be honest with you, I didn't even try to understand it. I just went with this feeling. I connect with them. I don't know why. I like them. I like their fight. I like their struggle. I want to tell that story. Reflecting on it while I was editing, I found that link, because one of my friends asked me, like, how? Like, why are you doing a film in Cuba? You don't know nothing about that. You didn't know nothing about the place. I did enough research. What's the reason? And I said, I don't know. So through a long chat, I found out that obviously I grew up watching my mother. My mother is an electrical engineer. She goes to construction sites and fights with all these men. And I grew up watching her, hearing about that, and obviously feeling, angry, because like, so what, it's an unusual career path in the Middle East for a woman. So I figured that must be the connection, because that was a big part of my childhood. And that's why I connected with these women. And on the other side of the world, obviously there were other things in Cuba that for some reason reminded me of Syria. I know they're so far apart. They're so not connected, but I don't know what it was. Some streets I would walk in and I would literally say to my mother, like, this reminds me of some childhood memories in Syria. I don't know why. Resistance. Obviously, I heard her story. I saw how men are there. Now, Cuba is also a bit difficult to understand for the first time you go there, because it's not black and white. Everything is so gray. And, it's not, you cannot just define it as, oh, it's just pure sexism, or they call it machismo. It's not, because there are some things you feel there is more equality between men and women than in the West. But then there are other things you're like, I don't get it. What's happening? It's a very interesting, like from a sociology point of view, it's very interesting. And it's not something you would be able to understand in a year or two. You probably need to live there for a long time. So I was very careful with that as well. I wanted to understand both sides of the story. Now, obviously, there's always a religious element of rumba music, and that's, for me, that's where I sort of was interested, because I felt that influenced this whole, oh, well, women are not strong enough to play the drums. And there's obviously a lot of other sort of superstitious beliefs about each drum having a certain saint. And, women are unable to play this drum because of whatever reasons, because of, period and all that other stuff, that I kind of have to respect that, because obviously it's their beliefs. But at the same time, that interested me. I wanted to know more. In terms of more literal resistance, the other male bands that were sort of watching us follow Rumba Morena didn't mind it at the beginning. So we were like filming with them, and they would see us around them a couple of times. They were okay. But towards the end of our trip, I started getting hassled. Yeah. So I would be filming, somebody would push me. Somebody would pinch me actually and say, oh, you're not supposed to film here. But I'm not, I was filming the band. So that's when I really felt, okay, no, something is up, because if they started to go after me now, it means that they don't like so much attention being given to this group, so that was more like the literal sort of, yes. So that obviously, as a filmmaker, when somebody does that, you're like, right, I'm just going to fight back now. I don't care anymore. I want to do this more than ever. It becomes more stubbornness more than anything else. So yeah, I guess that's basically it,
Yeah, and I actually, before you translate this, Savyash, I think we'll take that last piece of it to lead to, I wanted to hear Hassan talk about this too. I love what you just said, Mo, about at some point, you're actually literally fighting back. And in your case, you were let into a space and then you might have gone too far. And the trust that both sides had in you, at least one side falters a little. What I want to relay to Hassan is that and to both of you, is that there's a film in the festival called The Last Out, which is about Cuban baseball players that are trying to get into the MLB, the Major League Baseball. And just like both your films, the passion to cross these borders, whether they're cultural borders, literal borders, is so palpable. And in Hassan, in your film, you are taking a camera where you shouldn't be going. I mean, you're in the van with them as they're trying to get back to Afghanistan. They're scared. You must have been scared. The camera does the same thing with the other two filmmakers who were doing The Last Out. And so I'm curious if you could build on what Mo just said about, they're pinching me, they're pushing me, and I wanted to push back even harder with my camera. So I said, I'm definitely doing this. You literally were in dangerous places. Maybe talk to us a little about what that was like for you. Like, I think he said he was Persian, is that right? So he's from Iran, right? Yeah. So going into Afghanistan, how about your own safety? Just the literalness of taking this camera in order to represent passion. You literally have to go to the extremes that your characters are going to get to where they want to go. Good luck, Savyash. And you're muted. Siavash, I have not made this easy for you. I think you should get a t-shirt. We'll make sure you get a festival t-shirt for all of your efforts.
I think I just have to say that Hassan is from Afghanistan, and
he's from Afghanistan. Okay, so he's literally following them in the same exact path, right?
Right. Yes. حسن سوالی که ازت دارم اینه که یه فیلم دیگه امسال توی فستیوال هست به اسم آخرین خروجی و داستان بازیکنهای بیسبال کشور کوباست که میخوان بیان وارد آمریکا بشن و داخل لیگ حرفه‌ای که این کشور بازی بکنن و این آتششون، این شورشون برای اینکه از مرز رد بشن و وارد آمریکا بشن توی این فیلم نمایش داده میشه. حالا میخوایم اینو ببریم در مورد فیلم تو، این که تو دوربین گرفتی دستت و با این گروه رفتی جاهایی که قاعدتا نباید میبودین و خیلی خطر داشت و نشون میدادی که همه وحشت زده بودن. اینا تو چهره‌ها میشد فهمید. و به من بگو که چطوری بود؟ آیا مثلا اینجوری بود که تو همدیگر رو کمک کنین که مثلا روحیه رو بالا نگه دارین، اونایی کم تو رو تحریک کنن، توی کم اونا رو تحریک کنی، یا نه همه خیلی اوکی بودن برای اینکه بریم؟
نه هیچ چیزی اوکی نبود. خیلی بد بود اون شبا. شاید اون شبی که ما میخواستیم تصمیم بگیریم بریم ببین، قصه اینجوری بود که قرار بود ما هوایی بریم، یعنی توی افغانستان اصلا زمینی تردد نکنیم، ولی 2 روز مونده به کنسرت به ما اطلاع دادن اون تنها هواپیمایی که به بامیان میرفت، یه هواپیمای کوچیک مثلا 30-40 نفری، همه رو مقامات دولتی پر کرده بودن و هیچ بلیتی برای ما نبود و بنابراین ما 2 تا راه داشتیم، یا بیخیال رویاهامون میشدیم و برمیگشتیم ایران، یا اون مسیری رو تا اونجا اومدیم بریم، یعنی زمینی بریم و امید داشته باشیم که به پست طالبان نخوریم. شبی که یعنی توی فیلم هست ما باید تصمیم میگرفتیم، من به تصویربردارم گفتم که آماده باشه هر چیزی ممکنه رخ بده و در نهایت اگر بچهای بند نخوان برن ما برمیگردیم ایران، ولی اگر بخوان برن ما اخلاقاً باید همراهشون باشیم. خیلی تصمیم گیری سخت بود اون شب، همه آشفته بودیم، هیچ کس نمیتونستیم درست تحلیل کنیم وضعیت و ثریا گریه میکرد. خب یه دختر بچه‌ای بود 17 سالش بود اون موقع، باید آرومش میکردم، مسئولیت همه اون بچه‌ها با من بود و من نمیتونستم بهشون بگم که نرید و نمیتونستم بگم که برید. بنابراین یک سر قضیه این بود که همه گذشته بند و من توی این رویا یه جورایی خلاصه میشه توی این کنسرت و یه همچین بک‌گراندی پشت این تصمیم بود و یه طرفش هم طالبان و مرگ بود، یعنی ما بین مرگ و زندگی قمار کردیم، سربلند بیرون اومدیم. بنابراین خیلی سخت بود، هیچ کدومون اون شب نخوابیدیم، فرداش هم تا ظهر نتونستیم تصمیم بگیریم و خیلی ناگهانی شد، خیلی ناگهانی با یه تماس تلفنی که یک اکیپ دیگه یعنی از مردم عادی دایی یک از بچه‌ها از اون جاده رد شده بود و گفته بود چک پوینت طالبان نیست، همین. و ما راه افتادیم، ولی وقتی که ما رسیدیم چک پوینت طالبا بود و فقط مسئله این بود که ثریا چون داخل ماشین بود و ماشینی که زن باشه رو تلاشی نمی‌کنن مگر اینکه راپورت داده باشن که توی این یه فرد خاصی هست و طالبان نگه داشت ماشین رو، داخلش رو نگاه کرد، هممون وحشت زده بودیم، به رو خودمون شاید نمی‌آوردیم، نمیدونم، ولی چون ثریا اونجا بود گذاشت که ما رد شیم. فقط همینقدر بگم که من پاهم بی‌حس شده بود داخل ماشین و تا نیم ساعت بعد هر چقدر که سیگار می‌کشیدم استرابم کاهش پیدا نمی‌کرد، ولی خیلی ترسناک بود. نمیتونستیم به هم دیگه دلداری خاصی بدیم، نمیتونستیم قوت قلبی باشیم چون اوضاع از کنترلمون خارج بود، فقط خودمون رو سپردیم به سرنوشت. اگر عمرمون به دنیا بود میتونستیم رد شیم و الا که خب میموندیم دیگه.
Okay. No, nothing was okay in those days, in the days prior and the day of traveling to Bamiyan. And as you saw in the movie, the plan was to fly to Bamiyan, and then only 2 days before the flight, they just told us that the flight is fully booked and there were only 30 or 40 seats on the plane and they were all full. So at that point, we only had 2 options, either just forget about our dreams and go back to Iran, or take the road and hope for the best. And I had a conversation with my cameraman and I told him that we are morally and ethically obligated to go with the band if they want to pursue that dream. And that's what we did. And in the night before, it was hectic. Soraya, the girl in the movie, she was 17-year-old. She was crying, and we had to calm her down. And in a sense, my entire life would be summarized in that concert and in going to that concert. So we practically gambled death and life, and we were successful. And the night before, no one was able to sleep. And the only thing we knew before driving that road was one day before another person traveled that road and said there was no Taliban checkpoint. And that was comforting. We drove there. There was a checkpoint. There was a Taliban checkpoint. And the lucky thing was that we had Soraya with us. Oftentimes they wouldn't give you a hard time if you have a female passenger.
Wow.
And they checked the car. They weren't suspicious of anything, and they let us pass. And it was very stressful. I can tell that for half an hour my legs were numb, and no amount of smoking cigarettes also helped afterwards. But we eventually got through.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that definitely gets captured in both of your films. The pushback is captured in Hassan and yours. This behind the scenes story. I mean, obviously I didn't know the details, but when one watches the film, we are sitting on the edge of our seats too.
و این موقعیت‌های خیلی پر از استرس توی فیلم کاملا نشون داده میشه و ما هم لبه صندلی نشسته بودیم و با شما همراه بودیم.
This reminds me of something Susan Sontag had said in her book about photography, one of her books. And in one of the essays, she, I'm sure you know this, maybe not, that she has these 3 photographs of a man who's bleeding out. And the question, the ultimate, you said ethically, right, is do they keep the camera on and document that? Or do you put the camera down and call for help? And I wonder what each of you think about that. I'll let you translate it, Siavash, but we'll go to Mo first. But go ahead and translate so Hassan can think about it in the meantime.
بیشتر در مورد اینی که میگید از لحاظ اخلاقی این باید این تعهد داشتی که با گروه همراه بشی. اینو یکم بیشتر در موردش توضیح بده.
And
okay,
no, just to add a little more, go ahead. It's fine if you'd like to go now. But I want to add to that. You don't only have to talk about this film. I'm just thinking about you as a filmmaker and a storyteller and a film and a picture maker. What are your thoughts about that? Because you talked about the ethics of filmmaking.
و فقط اینکه الزاما نمیخوام راجع به این فیلم صحبت کنی. اگه کلا به عنوان فیلمساز میخوای در مورد وظیفه اخلاقی صحبت کنی.
ببینید مسئله اینه که این فیلم به من که تعلق نداره. یعنی من یه بخشی از کار انجام دادم. حتی این فیلم به کاراکترها هم تعلق نداره. یعنی شاید زندگی اونها بهانه‌ای شده برای اینکه ما در مورد یه وضعیت صحبت بکنیم، اما این چیزی که داستان شخصی اینها از نظر من پیوند داشت با یه سری مفاهیم شاید حتی خیلی جهانی تر. یعنی شما وقتی که به یه طبقه فرودست جامعه تعلق داری، وقتی که مهاجر هستی، فرقی نمیکنه کجای دنیا باشه، تو همواره یه دیگری هستی، همواره محدودیت داری، همواره سختی داری و اگر هم یه تفاوت نسلی وجود داشته باشه همه این سختی ها چند برابرن، چون توی خونه هم این مشکلات رو موقع غذا خوردن، خوابیدن، حرف زدن، کار کردن داریم. بنابراین من تصورم بر این بود که داریم در مورد یک وضعیت صحبت میکنیم به بهانه این بچه ها و این به عنوان مسئولیت اجتماعی اگر خیلی حرف گنده نباشه روی دوش من احساس میشد و این چیزی هست که مسیر زندگی من تعیین کرده و این فیلم یا هر فیلم دیگه یا هر وضعیتی دیگه اصلا خارج از سینما من به این کار ادامه میدم و مگه اونایی که مثلا توی زندانهای چه میدونم مثلا حکومت‌های دیکتاتوری یا سرویس‌های امنیتی شکنجه میشن، جونشون از دست میدن، ولی پای ایدهشون وای میسته، فرقی میکنه با اون لحظه‌ای که ما میخواستیم از اون جاده رد بشیم. بنابراین من تنها کاری که میتونستم بکنم این بود که اگر بچه‌ها خواستن برن همراهشون برم، و اتفاقا به تیم تصویر، یعنی به تیم تولید فیلم هم گفتم که شماها نیازی نیست با من بیاین، به دلیل اینکه ما از اول گارانتی کردیم که هوایی میریم و الان امکانش نیست و خطر جانی وجود، شما میتونید توی کابل بمونید. ولی همه گفتن ما میایم و فقط یک دست لباس محلی برای ما تهیه بکنید. به نظرم حداقل سینمای مستند از این منظر تکلیفش روشنه و مسئله ترس، مسئله عافیت طلبی، اینها اگر وجود می داشت که اصلا خب وارد سینما مستند نمیشه.
I want to say this movie doesn't necessarily belong to me. It doesn't necessarily even belong to the characters of the movie. It's just a few personal stories that may even have some more global concepts in them. And the whole idea is, if you belong to the lower socioeconomical classes, if you are an immigrant, your life is full of limitations, hardships, and then if you add generational gaps and misunderstandings, then that would add another layer to the problems. And I felt the responsibility to tell all these stories. And he even compared the fear that they had to experience during that road trip to prisoners who stick to their ideas when they are tortured in prison, and they will stick to their ideas. So this wasn't any different than that from that, and he still thinks this is what they had to do.
Thank you. And Mo, what are your thoughts about what I brought up about Susan Sontag? I mean, I know it's very controversial, but I'm just curious. You're muted.
Sorry. I can totally relate to what Hassan was saying. I think in terms of your question, I think especially if you grew up where we grew up and you wanted to make films, you sort of get creative of walking a very fine line of getting your film made. You always have to be smart about doing things. For example, in Cuba, it was always the worry was censorship, right? And we always had this feeling where we would go to the hotel or like the Airbnb, and we would never know if the police would knock on the door and just take everything away. So we would always like have 2-3 drives hidden somewhere. And when we fly out and in, we always split everything, and me and the DP would go different ways. So there was always a way of thinking of safety of the project, right? But in terms of, I think your question and that situation, I think sometimes we get as filmmakers, we get too carried away. And that sometimes could blind our moral judgment. For me, in that situation, I would say, save the man's life, more important than the camera, because if I really want to tell that story and what happens, I can save the man's life. I can use another way to tell what happens. I don't need to document a video. I can talk about it. I can say what happened and people will understand what happened. I don't need to watch someone die for my film. I can save their lives. That's what I would do. Yeah.
And in your work, like, do you feel that, tell us a little more about your body of work and what you're working on, how this fits into that conversation. I doubt that Uproar stands out differently than the rest of your projects.
Yeah, well, it depends. I go from, one of the things that I had to fight was being stuck in what do you call it? Like being pigeonholed into one thing in my work. I started in documentary because I like documentary, but I also didn't have access to a big talent pool to represent the ideas that I want to say. So documentary felt better, and it was more real because I could find a character that I really like, a real human being, and that's your lead. Let's say if you want to do like a drama or a fiction, that's your lead, but it's a real person. So yeah, I changed. I go from documentary to a documentary, all depending on, it's literally just gut feeling. There's so many projects that come or ideas that come, and I just always think about, do I really want to spend the next 2-3 years exploring this story?
Mhm.
Am I going to have the enough passion? Am I going to get bored? And that's always the question that I ask myself: is it worth all the hard work and all the? It also depends on what the project and where it's happening. You know, if you're shooting something, let's say in Afghanistan, that's going to be heavy. But yeah, it's always that. So in terms of my body of work, like, yeah, I started in documentaries, and I'm slowly moving to what I always wanted to do, which is actually fiction. But the stories that I like to tell always have to connect with me somehow. And generally, I find myself, trying to explore stories about people trying to survive somewhere, trying to fight something, trying to struggle. I don't know why. I can't do, happy stories for some reason, but that's what I connect with, Happy endings could happen, right? But in terms of like a more like lighthearted or something, generally, I tend to go to darker stories, and that's what I enjoy. And it's usually the common thread in my work. So yeah.
What about you, Hassan? I guess Siavash, you could just tell him a little about that question about the body of work and how does this fit into his larger body of work and what's he working on now? You're muted.
اصلا در مورد کارهایی که تا الان کردی یکم بگو و اینکه این کار چجوری کجا قرار میگیره نسبت بقیه کارات و اینکه الان داری کار جدیدی میکنی یا نه.
خب نه، من خیلی، یعنی این اولین فیلم بلندم هست. قبلش فقط 2 فیلم مستند کوتاه که اونم کار دانشجویی بود، یکی برای پایان نامه‌ام و یکی هم برای یکی از درسام. و از دانشگاه که اومدم بیرون اولین کاری که کردم این فیلم بود، هرچند که خیلی بلاز تولیدی برای من دشوار بود، این تجربه کافی رو نداشتم، ولی به هر حال تونستیم به سرانجام برسونیمش. راستش قبل اینکه افغانستان سقوط بکنه ما میخواستیم بریم برای یه فیلم مستند کوتاه در حوزه خشونت علیه زنان و کار پیش تولیدش انجام شده بود. برای تولید که یعنی عازم سفر بودیم کابل سقوط کرد و اون کار ناتمام ماند متاسفانه. فعلا تصمیم ندارم برای ساخت فیلم به دلیل اینکه توی ایران، یعنی با این وضعیتی که برای افغانستان پیش اومد و شرایطی که در ایران هست، دیگه بلا ذهنی برای من ممکن نیست زندگی در اینجا و نمیتونم توی این فضا حتی کار هنری رو پیش ببرم، کار فیلمسازی رو. برنامه‌م این هست که، یعنی برنامه کلیم برای زندگی که قاعدتاً در حوزه فیلمسازی معنا پیدا میکنه و تا پایان عمر مسیر زندگی من هست، ولی فعلا نه. برنامه‌ای که دارم خیلی به سینما مستقیم ارتباطی نداره. باید بتونم برم مجددا مهاجرت کنم یه جایی از دنیا که بتونم اونجا فیلم بسازم، یعنی اونجا شرایط فیلمسازی مهیا بشه تا بتونم این مسائلی که مد نظرم هست توی ذهنم هستم تبدیل به فیلم بکنم. بنابراین نمیدونم که این اتفاق میفته، ولی فعلا تصمیم برای شروع کردن فیلم ندارم.
Well, this was my first feature or documentary right out of college, and I had 2 short documentaries during the college years, and yeah, this was the first one. After this was done, I started the prep work for another documentary about violence against women in Afghanistan, and we started some of the work, but after the government collapse in Afghanistan, we kind of paused that process, and I don't see myself continuing that project, at least for now. In terms of my future, I think I will make movies till the end of my life, but at this point, it's kind of mentally impossible for me to do it. I can't in Iran nor Afghanistan, and I'm thinking about immigrating somewhere and hopefully being able to make movies there.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you another question about that, getting your work out there, but I think we're talking about getting yourself out there and being in a place where you can tell these stories. If you want to.
آره میخواستم بپرسم که حالا فیلم تو که خب تو جشنواره مختلف میفرستی ولی اینکه خودت هم آیا میری که خب تقریبا جوابشو گفتی.
نه الان نه، به خاطر محدودیت‌های کرونا نمیشه، ولی اون چیزی که گفتم در مورد رفتن از ایران، خب منظورم این بود که برای زندگی کلا یه جای جدیدی از دنیا رو احتمالاً تست کنم.
Yeah, at least for now, because of corona restrictions, I'm not able to travel. But yes, my long-term plan is to immigrate somewhere that I can make movies.
And yet, I think you can both speak to this reality, and maybe you too, Siavash, this idea that you want to stay in your home and you want to stay in the world that you know and tell stories in it. But sometimes, like, is it Milos Forman? You have to get out of it in order to tell it and perhaps open some doors.
و میگه که آره این تناقضی هست که تو میخوای توی کشور خودت بمونی که داستانهای اون کشور رو بگی، ولی از طرف دیگه باید خارج بشی از این کشور برای اینکه بتونی داستان‌ها رو بگی.
Yeah. I mean, that's for Mo too, he's from Syria, so my last question is do you have a question for each other? I mean, I know it's hard that you can't speak to each other because of translation, and if you want, you can put in a film festival you would have met at the theater. Both because you're international and because of COVID, we have very little in-person screenings compared to online. So if you want to go ahead and put your contact info in the chat so we can stay in touch, or you both can stay in touch, feel free. But if you have any questions for each other, go for it.
حتما سوال آخری که دارم اینه که اگر سوالی برای مو داری که دوست داری ازش بپرسی و یا اینکه و این غالبا از ما هم این سوال پرسید که آیا سوالی برای هم دیگه دارین یا نه.
خب من خیلی یعنی کامل متوجه صحبت‌های مو نشدم، ولی فیلمساز سوری هست. فقط می‌خواستم بهش بگم که خانواده من پیش از اینکه جنگ‌های سوریه شروع بشه به مدت 2.5 سال در دمشق زندگی کردن و هرچند اونجا هم مهاجر محسوب می شدن، اما بهترین خاطرات زندگیشون در مهاجرت توی سوریه اتفاق افتاد. خیلی از مردم اونجا راضی بودن، یعنی نوع مواجهشون با خانواده من و کنتراست زیادی داشت با تجربه مهاجرتشون در ایران. اما چون جنگ‌های سوریه شروع شد، اونا دوباره برگشتن ایران و الان اینجا زندگی میکنن، اما همواره از تجربه زندگیشون در سوریه به نیکی یاد میکنن. میخواستم بگم که خیلی سوال ندارم، خیلی خوشحال شدم که اینجا دیدمش و امیدوارم که هم کشور مو و هم کشور ما و هم همه جهان کمی آرامش ببینه.
Yes, he said unfortunately he wasn't able to understand what Mo was saying during this Q&A, but he just wanted to say that his before all the Syrian war started, his family was in Damascus, and they lived there for 2.5 years, and they only have good things to say about their experience there, and it was a very pleasant experience, and they have very good memories of living there. And after the war happened, they had to go back to Iran, and that was a different experience in Iran. So he just wanted to share that with you and say that he's happy to have met you, and he hopes that both countries and the world will see more peace.
Amen.
Likewise, amen, and thank you very much. I actually have a quick question, if we have time for Hassan. It's a question I ask most filmmakers that I feel have something related to me, like he's from Afghanistan, he lives in Iran. Does he feel that he always somehow circle around stories that are around exploring identity or around characters fighting to find out their identity, because it's one of the things that people like me and always struggle with. You know, growing up in so many different places, having parents from one place, living up in a different place. Now I'm in the UK. You start to lose track of where are you from. And the question becomes so difficult to answer because it will take an hour to tell you. So I wonder if he's going through the same thing, and if that's something he likes to explore in his upcoming films or something.
Great question.
ما تشکر کرد از این چیزی که به اشتراک گذاشتی و اینکه یه سوالم ازت داشت. اینکه اول از تجربه خودش گفت که همیشه این تو فیلمایی که میسازه این تلاش برای شناختن هویت خودش وجود داره. اینی که تو کی هستی، اینی که هی از یک کشور باید به یک کشور دیگه به یک کشور دیگه و میخواد بپرسه که آیا این مسئله هویت توی فیلم‌های تو خواهد بود در آینده، اینی که بتونی هویت خودت رو پیدا کنی؟
ببین، من تجربه زندگی در ایران رو دارم و افغانستان هم به نام کشورم شناسایی میشه، ولی هیچ علقه‌ای ندارم نه به ایران نه به افغانستان و اساساً هم مفهومی به نام وطن که از دل مثلا ایده دولت ملت میاد بیرون رو هم به رسمیت نمیشناسم. یعنی اگر به معنای جغرافیایی و مصطلحش هست، من آدم بی وطنی به معنای سیاسیش، ولی هموطن دارم. یعنی برای من مفهوم عدالت، مفهوم برابری، مفهوم آزادی، اینا مفاهیمی هستن که من حسن نوری 37 ساله رو شکل دادن، حداقل رؤیاش امکان تحققش. بنابراین هموطنای من کسی هستن که به این ایده باور داشته باشن هر جای دنیا که میخواد باشه. میدون جنگ منم جایی هستش که آدم ها به واسطه فقدان این ایده ها رنج میبرن. برای همین یه انسان سوری، یه انسان یمنی، عراقی، لبنانی، توی شیلی یا توی آفریقا هر جایی ممکنه هموطن من باشه و من اگر که بخوام یک چیز را توی فیلم هام دنبال بکنم، اونم این هستش که هر چیزی که موجب سرکوب آدم ها میشه، موجب سرکوب مردم میشه، موجب سرکوب تفاوت ها میشه، تا جایی که میتونم اونا رو برملا کنم. و اگر که از دل قصه یه انسان افغانستانی این محقق میشه، در مورد یه افغانستانی فیلم میسازن. اگر که از دل قصه یه فرد اروگویی این اتفاق میفته، میرم اونجا فیلم میسازم. بنابراین به نظرم مسیرم رو میدونم و خیلی برام فرق نمیکنه توی کدوم کشور یا کجا دنیا باشم، هر جایی که باشم یه دوربین داشته باشم و یه ریکوردر صدا که فرق میکنه.
I have experience of living in Iran and Afghanistan, but I don't actually feel that I belong to either of those countries. I don't see myself as a having a lot of a national identity. I'm not necessarily patriotic. I see myself as a nomad. I see myself as having no country, but having a lot of countrymen and countrywomen. I have comrades in Chile, Africa, Syria, wherever they are. They are my countrymen. And I will keep making movies that exposes any form of suppression of people, whether it is in my home country or Uruguay. And it's my trajectory, and all I need is a camera and a voice recorder.
Amen to that, both of you. Really, this has been so inspiring and potentially exhausting for Siavesh, but very inspiring. I just want to say, I'll share, I don't always when I host, but I'm also a filmmaker. I am a first-generation American. My parents are both Hungarian. They're products of survivors of the Holocaust coming from different parts of Hungary. And, you know, one of the missions here when we founded the festival was to make sure that we bring Pennsylvania stories out but also the global narrative so there's a connection. And here I am sitting in central Pennsylvania, so connected to so many aspects of what you're saying, having zero experience really with the literalness of what your films are about, but with the human connection, absolutely. And this idea, I love your question, Mo, about do we always have to tell stories of identity when we have multiple identities? I think that's a very relevant question for most of us, navigating our characters' stories in front of our camera, and then struggling with keeping it simple enough to make it one movie. So after Siavash translates that, I will conclude this section, but go ahead and translate it. And
فقط میخواستم اینو بگم که I'm also
English, yeah.
میخواستم بگم که منم یه فیلمساز هستم، منم یه مهاجر هستم، من خانوادم اهل مجارستان هستن و نسل اول آمریکایی هستم اینجا و بخش از این فستیوال فیلم هدفش این بود که این تجربه های مهاجرت رو به مرکز پنسیلوانیا بیاریم و تشکر کرد از مو به خاطر سوالی که پرسید در مورد این طبقات هویت هر فرد.
It's been so wonderful to have all three of you and the two of filmmakers that we have here, Mo and Hassan. Thank you so much for your points of view. I could probably talk to you for hours, and we'll try and get you actually here so you can see these beautiful historic theaters and meet our audiences. For your next film, continue to do, obviously, the work for all the reasons you just said. And we want to thank you on behalf of the Center Film Festival for being here. And thank you, Siavash, for translating.
فقط خواستم ازت تشکر بکنم که حضور داشتی توی این جلسه پرسش و پاسخ و امیدوارم که در آینده بتونیم اینجا توی پنسیلوانیا شما رو میزبانی بکنیم و فیلم‌های بعدی رو ببینیم.
خیلی ممنون. راستش به نظرم توی تمام این 2 سال بهترین کیانه‌ای بود که تو شرکت کردم. یعنی سوالات به گونه‌ای بود که آدم میتونست اون چیزی که درونش هست رو بیاره بیرون. برای من خیلی جذاب بود. مرسی هم برای این فرصتی که مهیا کردن، هم برای سوالات خوبی که پرسیدن. خیلی خوشحال شدم از آشنایی با همتون و امیدوارم که موفق باشید.
Thanks for inviting me. This was the best Q&A I had in almost 2 years.
Wow.
And yes, he's happy to be part of this.
Thank you very much.
And if people want to reach you or see your work, Mo, do you want to tell them where they can see your work?
Yeah, they can see it on my website. Mostly on my website. That's www.monajati.com. So MOENAJATI.com.
Which is the spelling of your name. So
yeah, simple.
And Hassan, what about you?
حسن، اگه مخاطبا بخوان فیلماتو ببینن کجا میتونن توی اینترنت به تو دسترسی داشته باشن؟
خب این فیلم که فکر میکنم هنوز امکان نمایشش نیست، یعنی اون پخش کننده میدونه که چجوری میشه تماشاش کرد، ولی اون 2 تا فیلم دیگر من صفحه اینستاگرام دارم. البته خیلی چیزای مناسب نیست، فیلم دانشجویی بودن که من ترجیح میدم حتی خودم دوباره نبینمش. و فکر میکنم که از ابتدای سال میلادی نمایش آنلاین شروع بشه. من یه صفحه اینستاگرام دارم، کلا خیلی اهل فضای مجازی نیستم و اگر اتفاقی بیفته اونجا به زبان فارسی اونم میذارم و نمیدونم به درد کسی میخوره یا نه.
Okay. He said people what happens with this movie is the distributor's decision, so he doesn't know where people can find the movie yet. He doesn't have a lot of online presence. It's mostly on Instagram, and he usually posts in Farsi, so maybe not the best platform.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This is the end of this live stream. We'll see you hopefully back for the next live stream and or in person here at the Center Film Festival.